Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Glad to have you with us, whether you're joining from LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. Hope that you will let us know where you're joining from and where in the world you're joining from. And also look forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions in the comments as we go along, because it is much more interesting and if you engage in the conversation, and love to be able to share your thoughts on the screen as we go along. Today we are talking about simplicity. Recently did a poll on, is there wisdom in keeping things simple? And the overwhelming response to the poll was that definitely there is wisdom in keeping things simple, or or having simplicity in our life. And so we're going to explore that a bit today. And as always, to lead in, just so we have a common ground for understanding how we see wisdom. And we see wisdom as a journey, and it's a journey that starts with gaining knowledge and getting information, facts, figures, and pulling that out as we go along. And then the next step in that process is gaining understanding. And usually that occurs as we have experiences and as we begin to have to use our knowledge and be able to do something with it, apply it in our lives to have it solve problems and overcome obstacles and so on. And then the last step in the process for us is when we actually go from knowledge and understanding to wisdom. And that's next step is involved in seeing things from a much bigger perspective, and especially a perspective outside of ourselves, so that we understand that as we apply our knowledge and use our experience, that it affects others, not just ourselves. And for those of us that have a spiritual bent, the way we look at it is seeing wisdom is seeing things through God's eyes, through our Creator's eyes, so that we see the greater impact, the influence and effect on our choices. And so that's how we see wisdom. And welcome, Scott. Glad to have you here. And Rosemary, as always, from Sydney. Welcome, and always good to see and hear from you. Zaid, welcome, and glad to have you again, as always. These are three of our regulars, and so appreciate their being a regular and being a part with us, and appreciate your engagement and involvement, because it makes things so much better when you are here. And I do want to remind you that if I look distracted, that I am not actually, but I have three different screens that are going on as part of this. And so I am checking those screens to make sure things are working well, and especially that I don't miss any of your comments, because they're very important. And welcome, Eunice. Glad to have you aboard as well. And Aaron, so glad to have you as part of the podcast today. So let's dig into this a little bit. As always, when we start talking about a new topic, I like to just look at defining some of the terms, because quite often our challenges become an issue because we don't have common ground to communicate. So let's see here. So we're talking about simplicity today, and simplicity is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as a state of being simple, uncomplicated, or uncompounded. And we're not going to look at the second definition, because that's not our target. And then the third definition is freedom from pretense or guile or candor, and then also directness of expression and restraint and ornamentation. In other words, austerity. So that is our definition for simplicity. I always like to also get images. I guess it's the teacher in me. I like to present information multiple ways because it's helps us learn. And I especially was drawn to a couple of these, like this one, where you see the windy, twisty wire versus the straight one. I think that's gives us some insight into how people view the being simplistic. And here's another one similar. And here again, what I keep seeing image-wise is that it's about making things less complicated or easier to deal with. So that's simplicity. I decided that I would also look at the word simple, because the simplicity is based in the root same as simple. And according to, again, the dictionary, easily understood or done, presenting no difficulty. Second is plain, basic, or uncomplicated in form, nature, or design, without much decoration or ornamentation. And so that's our dictionary view of it. And then simple, I thought it was interesting. There's even some tips out there for simple. And they involve, let me get this a little bit bigger and see if this will help. Let's see here. Again, working all these different screens makes it interesting. Find out if how simple I need it to be able to do things. How about that? That will, here we go. Let's get that one in the center. And okay, talks about decluttering, talks about avoiding noise, keep only beautiful, useful things, practice gratitude, stop rushing. So again, concepts of what we're talking about when we express simplicity or simple. And as we go along, I want to hear from you as to your thoughts, because for me and our podcast, that is such an important part. Welcome, Ravi. Glad to have you with us this morning. Or excuse me, it's morning where I am. Don't know, got people from all over the world, so it could be evening. In fact, I know that for Rosemary, it is late in the evening, and she still joins us. So let me get to your comments. Again, the key here is that we find a way to consider simple, because it is apparently felt that being simple has a lot of wisdom to it. So, Eunice, I apologize. You show up here on the StreamYard as a LinkedIn user, but this is my good friend Eunice from Africa. Glad to hear from you. So, wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempt to acquire it. Great quote. I like that. Yes, it is not something that we learn just by knowledge. It's something that we have to gain over time and with effort or intention. Let's see here. And Eunice also says simplicity is freedom from extravagance, luxury, and complexity. I like that. Excuse me. And Zaid shares that everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. And for another quote from Einstein, rather interesting that Einstein, who was considered one of the smarter human beings around, that that he talks so much about simplicity, right? So a certain irony there. Ravi shares simplicity as being human. That's a good perspective. And Rosemary confirms it's actually after 11 o'clock where she's at. So thank you for hanging in there. And Aaron comments that it sounds like it's through a process. I assume that you're speaking in terms of wisdom. And yes, it is a process, and it's not a once and done process. It is ongoing. And hopefully we make an effort to gain wisdom. Welcome, Mary Angela. Glad to have you, and look forward to hearing from you. So, if indeed there is wisdom in being simple, then I think what we should talk about is ways to simplify. What does that look like? And I think we need to address the question of, can we oversimplify? And if so, what are the dangers of that? Remember, part of wisdom is getting that big picture so that as we consider things, that we do so with that big picture and make good choices, not just choices in the interim that will be make mistakes by oversimplifying, etc. I apologize. I am experiencing some little bit of technical difficulty here. If you'll bear with me, we'll get caught up. I want to make sure not to miss anyone, and I use the screen, which is my phone, to make sure that I am not missing anyone, because sometimes the stream service doesn't keep up somehow. But hey, welcome to technology, right? Welcome to Satish. Glad to have you with us. And I'm going to attempt your name. I hope I don't mispronounce, but Chiamika. Glad to have you. I believe that's your first time with us. So glad to have you with a part of today. So let's see. Okay, Aaron makes a nice example. Simplicity in music is singing one part in unison. Okay, I like that. And let's see, Ravi shares, we are by design simple, but we somehow, through culture, conventional education, interactions with complex agents, forget that we are simple. And I agree. I believe that we are intended to live simply, although we aren't simple. We are quite remarkably made and well made and created, but we never, in my opinion, were intended to live with too much complexity. And I know that one could argue that if we oversimplify, we potentially make mistakes. And I would agree with that. We have to keep a balance. And any of you that know the Wisdom Seeker podcast know that balance is a very important part of how we see things. And so just as we consider it, that we not make errors in being out of balance in our approach. And let's see, Chamika, simplicity is a mindset, not necessarily a lifestyle. Okay, I see that there is a mindset involved. I do think it will filter into our lifestyle as we approach it. And Ravi's from India saying that it's 5:40 p.m. their time. So we've got people all over the world in many different times. And so glad to hear from everyone. Let's see, Aaron makes a comment. Mother Teresa speaks a lot on this as being her life focus in keeping her life extravagances simple so she can help more people. Sure, it is about not getting caught up in things, I think, is one of the big problems we have is we get so caught up in things rather than in who we should be and in people. And the more we have things, and I don't know about you guys, but the more things I have, the more time it takes for me to keep up with them. And that's why, as I have gained some maturity or age, if you will, more and more I am less and less enthralled with things. Now, don't misunderstand me. I enjoy some of the nice things I have, and I feel very blessed. But for example, as I look forward to retirement, the traditional retirement in the U.S. especially is, well, do you retire to and have a mountain home or somewhere at the beach or whatever? And when I think about those, because I have strove to be more simple, I see those things as just more responsibilities and duties to keep me from focusing on living rather than things. So I get the comment about Mother Teresa. When we are less focused on having things, extravagances, then the easier it is to focus on what we are about individually. And Satish makes a comment, says, all our woes are because of complexity in life today. I certainly understand that, Satish, that I think we do overcomplicate things. We do cause ourselves a lot of grief by not keeping things simple. And I think that it's something that as we grow in wisdom, hopefully we learn how to keep things simpler. And as a result, by the way, part of keeping things simple is less stress, less things to worry about, and less distraction from being about living who we are. In fact, it comes to my mind that one of the considerations we should have is, well, do I need this to be and do what I am created to be? And if not, should I have it? Do I need it for that purpose? And I know that I've even have people in my life that are getting away from more and more things and making things simpler, and even looking at more ways to simplify further. And a lot of it's around having ownership of stuff. And I think that that is one of the easiest things that we can, or I say easy, probably not always easy, but the simplest thing we can do is to not be so caught up in having things, stuff, that it causes us to be distracted. Because, for example, I think of parents that work so much, spend so much time away from their family working because they are trying to gain stuff for their children. What we see, what we've understood and grown to know is that most of the time the children would rather have time with their parents rather than having the stuff that losing the time allows them to have. And so it's a priority culturally that we've gotten away from. And Eunice makes a comment. She says, there's beauty in simplicity. Take a breath and remember that simple is beautiful. Simple is intentional. And I think that's a key part, Eunice, is that we have to be intentional in being simple. It sounds almost contradictory in terms, but it is something that we need to do. And part of its bigger picture is that we need to be intentional about life and intentional about gaining wisdom. So intentionality, it may be a good key concept to keep in mind as we look at even simplicity and the wisdom in it. Mary Angela comments, if one's life is simple, contentment has to come. Simplicity is extremely important for happiness. Having of having few desires, feeling satisfied with what you have is very vital, as quoted from the Dalai Lama. I have to agree that simplicity does indeed help with contentment. And I think that we do well to seek contentment even beyond seeking out peace. I think that when we can have contentment for ourselves, then we are more likely to find the peace that most of us are looking for. And welcome, Shrenik. Glad to have you. Appreciate you being on board with us. And Lee, glad to see you again. Lee's one of our regulars as well. Rosemary throws out a thought. Is it important to ask the question, is this something I want or is it something I need? Oh, such a good question, Rosemary. When we start thinking in terms of simplicity, asking the question of need versus want becomes important. What's interesting for most of us, and we see this starting in our children, that need is something that is generally pretty permanent, whereas want is very transient. And you watch children. I have 5 children and 5 grandchildren, and I watch their behaviors. And you give them a new toy or whatever, and that might occupy them for a time and be entertaining, but in a matter of a short time, it loses its interest and it becomes just another object, and that goes to want versus need, and it's certainly a good thing to consider. And Lee throws out a comment: simplicity or expectations. Okay, I think that expectations do become a part of what simplicity is. If we're expecting that to be successful or to have happiness or whatever, that our expectation, it involves owning lots of things or what have you, then it becomes a part of the question of simplicity. Frankly, I think we need to stop making ourselves slaves to expectations, especially others' expectations. And it comes back to the question of, is this part of who and what I am? And is, like Rosemary said, is it a need? And if it's not, then we should consider, is that something that I should avoid or stop? And just make that decision, because again, I think ultimately the simplicity we're looking for is simply to be who we are, who we're created to be, and live in accordance with that, rather than being successful by having the various trappings and so on. And so I think that needs to be part of our key is this part of who I am, what I need to be, what I even, as I learn, want to be? And Eunice offers, throw more light on simplicity and appearance. Yeah, I think that, again, we get so caught up in meeting expectations of others that we think we have to dress a certain way, wear a certain hairstyle, so on. Whereas if we consider, does this help me be me better or a better me? Either way, I think it works, but that becomes a question. If not, then I think we do well. The wise consideration is, do I need it then? If it's not a part of who I am and what I need to be doing based on my vision, my priorities in life, then go, well, maybe I don't need to have that or do that, and becomes a good way to consider or a wise approach to simplicity in our lives. And then Aaron shares need versus want is great ways to help children identify desires. I agree. And I think that we as adults, as the leaders in our family, we need to model that. In other words, we go to get the newest something. Electronics, I know that's a challenge for me because I like electronic gadgets. But I started asking myself now, do I really need this? And will I really use it? And or will it end up being something that I end up in a box or a closet or something like that? And later I have to figure out what to do with it because I'm not using it anymore. And it is just something to keep up with and clutter my world. So, need versus want, and then model that behavior for our children, our family, others. Because remember, I'll get into a little bit aspects of leadership that we are all leaders in our own world, and whether we have the title or not, such as being parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, by being role models in volunteer different ways. So really consider, are we modeling simplicity or balanced approach in terms of things and life? Here's another quote Mary Angela shares is simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3 and not 100 or 1,000. A quote from Thoreau. Again, the way I think we can simplify, as mentioned 2 or 3, is that we start making decisions based on our vision, who we are. And I think that's why it becomes so important to really be intentional to understanding that, because then that gives us a priority of how to simplify and how to consider life. And if it's not a part of what I need to be about, and it's not a part of what I can do to be me to help others, then I think it's a good question to go, do I really need this? Zaid shares a comment, says at work, if one talk about simplifying the processes and not joining the wagon of big data could get you labeled as anti-growing or anti-developing. Yes, I understand. Right now, culturally, we want to make things complicated, especially when it comes to the whole concept of data. We got to crunch all this information, and I understand that, having run a business and having led groups and all, there is a need to have information and understanding. But I think what we see in the workplace, Zaid, is that we are basing it more on knowledge, and we're basing it a little bit on experience and understanding, and very little of it about a wise perspective. Because the wisdom, as we approach those things with wisdom, we have a different perspective. And once we start getting that bigger perspective, then our priorities align differently. But I understand that that's very common in the workplace and in our cultures. And what's interesting, and I could be wrong, and share if you think I'm misstepping on this, but the more we become involved with ownership of things, the life gets more complicated. If we're focused on living and focused on having life rather than trying to have stuff to have life, I think it will make a huge difference for us. Ravi comments, I think life is in gray shade. When we compassionately embrace contradictory views, then life starts becoming peaceful. I certainly appreciate the comment. And when you say contradictory views, Ravi, as I think of balance, because balance is not being middle ground all the time, as we have sometimes considered it or culturally look at it. I think what we need to understand, real balance, is having two opposing good characteristics and being able to keep them in tension. And sometimes when we, or as we do that and as we gain wisdom, we learn which one of those competing characteristics or contradictory views is needed in that given moment. And so the favorite example I always like to share is love and truth. We need both. We have to have both, but we have to know when each one is a priority. Excuse me. Ooh, dry throat this morning. Welcome, Dr. Jesmond. Glad to have you. And Jane, glad to have you as well. A couple of our other regulars. And appreciate you joining in. Look forward to hearing from you. Rosemary makes a comment. Gray is a mini shade of beautiful. Yes. Sometimes people think gray is somehow boring. It can certainly be a peaceful color, if nothing else. Mary Angela shares another quote. Secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. I like that. It's about a perspective. It's about how we value who we are, what we consider successful. And unfortunately, again, much of our culture is wrapped around, I think of two things. One of them is things, and the other is status in life. And I think those are two of the big things that complicate our life and keep us from having simplicity and adds to our lack of contentment, because there's always something else new, something more, that if that's important to us, that we'll be seeking to make us better, to make us more acceptable, and so on. And one of the insights or principles I think that helps us in keeping it simple is also knowing and accepting and truly, truly living our value. I watch people so often try to add value to themselves, and it comes in different ways. It comes in what we have, our job, what we can accomplish, and so on. And those are all ways that people are trying to somehow add value to themselves. Folks, I keep saying it, and I will keep on saying it. We need to understand that our value has been established. It is intrinsic. It is given to us by our Creator. It's not something we earn. We can't do enough to get value. We have all the value we need given to us by our Creator, and it's also not given to us by other people. So as a result, we can't lose it since we didn't earn it, and we can't have other people take it away because they didn't give it to us. And our Creator loves us enough to give us our value, and therefore, as a result, that love's not going to take the value away. And when we truly settle that, when we believe that, we live it, and it becomes an undeniable, unquestioned truth for us, then things don't have their allure. Having that great job loses its allure because it doesn't add value to us. It doesn't make us better, more important, or anything else. And so I think that's a root of what will help us to begin to simplify. Let's see, I want to get back to comments that you all are making. And by the way, I really enjoy the fact that everyone is carrying on conversations as part of the broadcast, the podcast. I really enjoy that, and I'm glad to see everyone doing that. Excuse me. And let's see here. I'm having to catch up because I'm scrolling along. And let's see. Jane, let's see, makes a comment addressing Eunice. when you look closely, the world is exactly as it has always been. Humanity has changed. Many lost sight of God. Back to that value thing. Back to understanding that we can have things and have so-called successes, but they aren't life. Life is being about who we're created to be and living it. And what happens is, as we do that, we begin to understand abundance. And it almost sounds contradictory, abundance versus simplicity. And I think that's where we get some of the sayings that simplicity brings life and so on. And Dr. Jasmine comments, all crucial comments stated various perspectives of life. Yes. And Zaid asked a question, is simplicity equal to thinking outside the box? Zaid, I would say, depends on what box you're in. And it could very well be. We get boxed in by expectations and what we perceive as being successful and having value and importance and things like that. And if we're caught in one of those boxes, we are definitely need to think outside the box and be intentional. And Eunice goes on to share, with the changes in the world now, simplicity will be the best approach. Definitely. It's interesting that we have a lot of people that are trying to complicate our lives, and by causing us to focus on lots of different things that go to the question of control and influence. We are inundated with information that tries to attract our thinking and our mindset and all of that we can't control and we can't influence. So we really shouldn't even be focused on it or being driven by it. So simplicity is part of it. I mean, when we started the podcast, I encouraged everybody to disconnect, get away from the noise, get away from the complications, and then observe both inwardly and outwardly, and then seek wisdom in regards to what we observe. And I think what the result as part of that process is going to be that we will simplify, because we will begin to see what we can control and influence and what we can't, and what we can do and not do, and therefore simplifies. Rosemary, appreciate you being with us. And oh my, y'all, daylight saving started already, so it's even later than usual. Well, I hope you'll get some good rest. Thanks for being a part of the podcast every week. And I appreciate Aaron's support that our value is already in full. We can't add to it. We are valuable just like we are. Let's see. Dr. Jesmond says patience, compromisation, forgiveness, easygoing, key elements. And I especially want to clue in on one, Dr. Jesmond, and that's forgiveness, because another thing that really complicates our life that we seem to give room to, and it's unforgiveness. Because the more we carry unforgiveness, the more complicated things are. Because if we forgive anyone and everyone, then we're not always wondering about our relationship to someone. If all's forgiven, then we certainly are not having to be so complicated in our relationships. Again, it taken to extremes, I understand, can be a problem, and I don't mean to oversimplify, but I think at this point we need to be focused more on simplifying than not. And I promise, if we start moving out of balance in the other way, I will be, as long as I'm still around, I'll raise the question and say, are we getting too simplistic? Eunice comments that it's all about humans. We have what it takes to create and make things better. We have a lot of opportunity to influence and affect our world. The problem is, and I go back to simplifying, is we're so busy trying to keep up with what makes us somehow successful, look better, look more accomplished, and so on. And as a result, we get away from the potential we have to have a great impact on our world, to bring about good change. And let's see, Ravi makes a comment in response to Eunice. Actually, it's very easy to find why we're not simple. Sit in a moral science class with our kid and make notes. Later, check if we possess these values as an adult in our actions in daily life. If we are able to find gap, we will strive hard to become simple again. Otherwise, we will remain whatever we are. Key thing there, Ravi, is constant evaluation. And that is something that we talk about a lot. It comes under the heading of self-awareness, and it's part of the process I described earlier of disconnecting, observing, and then seeking wisdom. I think the more we are intentional in that, the better chance we have to live more simply, because we begin to determine what is priority in our lives. And as a result of understanding our priorities, our design, our purpose. Welcome, Dr. Shukla. Glad to have you with us. I apologize. I just now seeing that you're with us. Always glad to have additional people join us. But again, best way to simplify is to understand who we are, who we're designed to be, created to be, and then set our priorities accordingly. And as we do that, we begin to simplify, because we're not caught up in what others say that we need to be doing to be successful, to be happy, and so on. We then begin to live based on who we are, what we are, and makes a huge difference, because once we're focused in that direction, we start living in accordance with our design, and life does become simpler, because we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We're not trying to know everything. One of the conversations we had in the podcast recently was about being well-rounded, and how that is really not a proper perspective. Well-rounded, excuse me, is about complicating our life. We don't have to be well-rounded. What we need to be is the best at being who we are and living who we are designed to be. That is how another way we can simplify, and so we just need to be really looking into it. And Dr. Shukla says, I fully endorse Dr. Sabrina Jasmine. Forgiving inertly is a very human with a divine underlying. Yes, as the saying goes, what to err is human, to, I'm going to butcher this saying. To err is human, to forgive is divine. And so, again, forgiveness is a good, along with many values in in our life, forgiveness is so crucial, not just to those that we forgive, but for us, because the more unforgiveness we carry, the more we complicate our mind, our will, our emotions, everything. Let's see here. Want to make sure that I'm not going out of order here. Try to keep up with your comments. By the way, I am glad that y'all are challenging me to be able to keep up, because it's about y'all's comments. It's not just about me monologuing. Let's see, Dr. Jesmond makes a comment. Otherwise, when we're from a developing country, starting professional life in developed country, compromising is the key. Yeah, you've got to be able to give and give up to be able to simplify as well. And I appreciate, Ravi, you agreeing with my comment. Thank you. And then Zaid, yeah, the whole concept of being well-rounded, I think there is a lot that we need to consider there, because I think it has been brought into our culture, especially through education. And I think it's become pervasive in our work world as well, that somehow we have to be well-rounded and know all of this and that. And when some of those things aren't important to us, they may be important to someone else, and that's okay. But we don't necessarily have to have all of that as part of our brain and part of our energy and so on. And again, when we get into being well-rounded, we get into ways that are complicate our lives and complicate our minds. And so I think it may be something that is a part of the conversation about priorities and simplicity. Welcome, Jeremy. Always glad to have you, my friend. Let's see, Dr. Shukla makes a comment. Says, I fully agree with simplifying life. It is like returning at home and unwinding all the web we get enmeshed with every day in our pursuit in this modern wild. I agree with you, Dr. Shukla. It's really interesting that we go out away from our home base and we get caught up in so much. And by the time the day is through, we're exhausted, and understandably. And I think part of that is because we have allowed the culture and the world to conform us to what is acceptable and what is considered good and what is considered abundance. And in fact, I'm always a little hesitant when I refer to abundance, because I know that the abundance I speak of quite often has very little to do with things or money. Yet when I know when I use the term, a lot of people automatically go to the idea of money and things, as that's the evidence of being accomplished and so on. Eunice's comment, my final words, everything we do is prayer. Simplicity, therefore, is where peace and freedom lies. I agree that we really do need to simplify. And that doesn't mean, I believe one of the quotes from Einstein is, yes, simplify, but don't be simple. And I think that's where the wisdom comes in. Wisdom helps us to simplify without being simple. And the wisdom, if we walk in wisdom, we can simplify, because we begin to understand what is important and what's not. And it helps us to not become simple. In other words, not thoughtful and considerate. Whereas if we try to do so without wisdom, we have a very distinct possible backlash of becoming simple in what we do, which is can be a problem in itself in our lives if we become simple about things. Let's see, Satish says, life would be simple if we start living in the present. Regret about past mistakes and worry about the future complicates life. Yeah, it's a fine line that we have to walk, Satish. We have to understand our past and grow from it, certainly, but we don't have to live in it. In fact, if we live in the past, chances are we're going to repeat it. and make the same mistakes. And the future, yes, we have always been taught to plan for the future. And I agree on some level that there's wisdom in doing that. But to the degree that we have come to do this culturally, we have really gotten way extreme in that we think errantly that if we plan well enough, our future will be really great. We can plan our retirement. We can plan all of this stuff. And I'm not talking about being simple and just ignoring all that. There has to be a consideration. But if any of those things get in the way of truly living present, living now, and being now as who we are best at being, becomes a problem. And so the simplicity of it is learn from the past, look to the future, but live in the present. And there's a lot of good sayings about that, and that helps a lot as well. Because if we're living in the present, again, it helps to establish our priorities and consider how we use our time and so on. So good comment. Thanks, Satish. Let's see. Aaron comments, I learned so much about simplicity in a 1-week trip down to Mexico. The battered women and children's shelter kept things very simple. They celebrated birthdays for the kids 4 times a year. As a whole, everyone had their responsibilities around the grounds, and everyone took care of another. And yes, seeing other cultures is such a value. I know that years ago, I went on a mission trip down to Guatemala, and seeing other cultures, especially relative to things, again, I come back to our complication in our life quite often is around things and trappings and appearances. And what I discovered was, as I observed the children down there when we were actually, it was a construction ministry that we did. But I watched children with a few toys, with a few things, very happy, very much enjoying being children. And it didn't mean having all these toys, all these things. It was about just enjoying being with other children and enjoying life as a child. And I think that is so insightful. And as we look at other cultures that are moving along and seem, quite frankly, much happier than many of us that live in cultures that have, supposedly we're developed and have all these good things, but yet the people that are simplifying are a lot happier. So I get it. It's something that we really need to consider. And so it's pretty fascinating. Aaron comments, yeah, ours was too. I wasn't toolsy, so I helped keep the kids out of. Okay, so y'all were down there for the same purpose. I appreciate that. And by the way, that's important too, being able to keep allowing others to use their talents by using your talents to keep the kids occupied and so on. So yeah, it's all got value there. But the nice thing is the perspective it gives us a different idea of what life can be about. And that's why I think, not everyone can join a mission team and go to another country or even travel to another country for whatever reason. But I think that when we force ourselves to disconnect, get away from all the influences of the culture around us, and just stop and look at it and go, I'm not even sure this needs to be in my life, and do that, and then take effort to observe what's going on inside of you, what's going on around you. And then during that observation process, ask the question, can I control it? Can I influence it? If I can't, why am I even have it on my mind? Or why is it part of my daily life? It is something that we really need to consider. And of course, the biggest battle we have there is the ever presence of media. And that includes social media, such as where we're at. But just we are being pushed to take on things, take on ideas, concepts, concerns that we can't control, we can't influence, and they complicate our lives to a point that it causes us not to be able to have contentment and not to be able to simplify. So, one of our key things to simplify: step back, disconnect, look. Is it something that it matters? Do we really need that, whatever it is, to be effective in who we are? Key questions that we have to ask about simplifying. Figure out what is important. And by the way, what I come to the conclusion of as important is about who I am and what my life is about. It may or may not be something that should be important or priority to you. And one of the things I've learned to do is I don't need you to be like me to validate who I am. And I hope that each of you do the same, that you don't feel like you need to be like me to validate who you are. Because if that's something that you're always living under, wow, talking about complication, that is real complicated. So let's see. Jeremy comments: learn from our past, live in our present, yet be strategic in our future endeavors while staying true to others and ourselves is a key tool in helping simplify our lives, brother. I agree, Jeremy. It is, again, keeping the right priorities, keeping the right perspective. And as we do that more, we begin to, um, is helps us to begin to simplify, because we determine then what is important. And if it's not important, then why are we dealing with it? We shouldn't be. If we can't control it and we can't influence it, then we don't need to be bothering with it. And I've got a graphic that is on my profile, if any of you would like to check it out, that developed with my business partner, Anton, about that very question. If you can put it in a bucket of control, put it there and then make a plan to address it. If not that, if it can fit, goes in the bucket of influence, then put it in that bucket and make a plan and deal with it. If it doesn't fit in one of those buckets, you don't need to be bothering with it. You need to let go of it. And then for me, my spiritual terms is that I let go of those things and let God handle it, because it's not something that I can take on, and it's not something that I should take on. And Satish makes a comment that he was responding to Jeremy, that strategizing for future is also living in the present. It certainly is. It's a factor in it. But even that, if we get so caught up in trying to strategize our future, including things we can't control. I'm going to get on a little soapbox here, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but this whole thing about the pandemic we're in, and we think that if we do just this right thing, that our future will be fine. And by the way, implied in there is if we keep doing this, we won't die. And I don't mean to be morbid or negative, but we're all going to die. So the best thing we can do is be prepared for that, so that the fear of death is not driving what we do in our present. I see so many people so afraid of dying that they never learn to live. And that is another one that complicates our life remarkably. And so we are about out of time. Wow, what a great discussion today. Thank you, everyone. Welcome, Nuvara. Glad to have you. Appreciate so much your being involved. I know you've been involved from nearly the beginning. So thanks for being here. Appreciate that. And sorry about the noise there. So again, thanks everyone. So glad to have you here today. Let's figure out how to simplify. And I think that one of the ways we can do it is to find out about who we are and who we are designed to be, and then set priorities accordingly. And as was shared, learn from the past, live in the present, and strategize for the future to a point, but not to a point that it keeps us from living in the present. Welcome, Jack. Glad to have you. I know you've been with us before. So I hope that we've all learned a bit. I know I have, about the wisdom in simplifying and how much it can make a difference in our lives. And I appreciate that each of you've been here, and I appreciate that you've also participated. Makes for a much more interesting podcast. And by the way, we learn a lot more the more you all participate. I can share my perspectives, and I appreciate the opportunity. But this is about gaining wisdom together. And we'll be back next week on Monday morning, 8 a.m. Hope that you'll invite others to join us. Don't know the topic yet. I am focused possibly on discussing humility and how it factors in, but haven't nailed that down yet. And either way, if you're there with us, I know that we can all seek and gain wisdom together. So God bless you all. Have an amazing week. Thanks for being a part, and look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.